Welcome back to the first part of the life of Prince Rogers Nelson, or Prince, and we're going to go way back. Prince Rogers Nelson was a product of the Great Northern Migration and can trace his paternal and maternal family to decades in Louisiana. Prince's great-grandfather, talking on his paternal side, was Reverend Edward Nelson, a minister in the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church, or CME, in Cotton Valley, Louisiana, a place that was a former home of many cotton plantation, as the name says, Cotton Valley. Reverend Edward Nelson was born March 1862 during the Civil War, which would result in the abolition of slavery, and he was born to a white enslaver, a plantation owner, John Nelson, and a former enslaved Cherokee woman. Edward Nelson, Prince's great-grandfather, was denounced when he married a black woman named Emma, who was born into slavery in 1862. The family believed in the teachings of Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, who supported the idea that the formerly enslaved should relocate to the continent of Africa for their safety and prosperity. Prince's revolutionary great-grandaunt, Mittie Maud Lena Nelson Gordon, reported that racism was so rife in their area they lived in Louisiana that she once observed a lynching of a man, Will Streak, carried out by a white mob of about 1,600 people near Dorleen, Louisiana. Additionally, though slavery had ended in the mid-1900s, 1865, the desire to deprive black people access to education persisted. Mittie said school facilities for colored people were so bad in Webster's parish that the third grade was as high as one could go because pressure was so strong against educating Negroes. End quote. So slavery was over, but slavery was still on. Her brother Clarence Allen Nelson became Prince's paternal grandfather. Clarence married Carrie Jenkins. Carrie Jenkins' parents were Handy Jenkins and Diane Phillips, and they were both born into slavery. Clarence and Carrie, grandparents of Prince, divorced shortly after the birth of John Lewis Nelson, who is Prince's father, and he was born in 1916. Like his father, Clarence Allen Nelson, Prince's grandfather, became a minister in Cotton Valley until he moved his family to work at a church in Hope, Arkansas, where the conditions were just as bad as they were in Louisiana. By the 1930s census, we see Carrie, Prince's grandmother, is recorded as living in Minneapolis. She's now a widow and from her second marriage. Like his mother, between the 1930s and 1935, Prince's father, John Rogers, joined the Great Northern Migration to Minneapolis. In 1938, at the age of 22, he married Vivian Howard, with whom he fathered 4 children. He worked various jobs to support his family, including hotel doorman at a war plant. In 1945, he enlisted in the military. John was innately gifted, a self-taught musician who played the piano, and later Prince would learn from him by watching him. Prince's father was a part of a musical trio that played in the segregated clubs in Minneapolis. Yes, so segregation is in the South. It's also in the North, right? Same people, different area. On his maternal side, Prince's maternal great-grandparents were born in Louisiana. Shaw Preston in 1840 and Eliza Brith, both were born into slavery and were the parents of Frank Shaw, who was one of 12 children. And he was born in 1896 after slavery ended. Prince's maternal grandfather was the first generation not born into slavery. Prince's grandmother, Lucy Barnell or Bunnell, parents were Sam Walter Bunnell and Kathy F. Head. She was born just after slavery. And Prince's grandmother, Lucy Bernard Shaw, was born in 1899. Prince's maternal grandparents, Franklin Shaw and Lucille Bunnell, were married in Polk, Iowa in 1919. Frank Shaw registered, that's Prince's grandfather, registered for the draft during World War One. The couple was first listed as residents of Minneapolis City in the 1930s. Frank was a porter and Lucille was an elevator operator. Prince's mother, Mattie Della Shaw, or Del Shaw, and her twin, Edna Mae, were born on November 11, 1933, and was the first generation born outside of Louisiana. In February 1933, at the age of 20, Prince's mother married Alfred Jackson in Missouri, and they had one child together, Alfred Jackson Jr., the same year. Mattie Della Shaw was a jazz singer in the style of Billie Holiday. She sang with the Prince Rogers Trio, and a romance developed between her and Prince's father, John. John was still married at the time. When John's divorce was finalized from his first wife, he was 47 and Mattie was 24. And they married on August 31, 1957, in Norwood, Iowa, to avoid the 6-month wait period mandated for Minnesota residents after a divorce. About 9 months later, on June 7th, 1958, they welcomed the first of their 2 children together, Prince Rogers Nelson. His father, John, said, "I named my son Prince because I wanted him to do everything I wanted to." End quote. So you're seeing the history unfolding. And if you're looking at it on the macro level, you're seeing from slavery to different new forms of slavery, segregation to segregation, moving north. You're thinking the thing is ending and it's still going on. And you're seeing on maybe the meso level, less on the interpersonal level, it's divorces in the family, people moving around, and you're going to see that it's how we look at the threads of things, that things are cumulative, they're building on each other, and if you're not aware, you'll be repeating history without knowing you're doing it. So the consciousness is to go see what happened and find the patterns in there. And I hope you saw some of the patterns in there. Thank you so much for listening.